Hello, everyone, and welcome to Walking Through the Bible. In Job 28, Job contrasted the physical knowledge that man possesses to do great things with the wisdom that only comes from God, the wisdom that teaches us to fear God and shun evil. In Job 29 and 30, Job is going to be contrasting his former life with his current life. These two chapters, along with chapter 31, will form Job's final defense against the accusations of his friends before we get into the next section of the book and the discourse of Elihu. So if you have a Bible with you, you can now turn to the book of Job to chapter 29. We're going to be reading from verses 1 to 13. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry, just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Job 29, beginning at verse 1. Job further continued his discourse and said, "Oh, that I were as in months past, as in the days when God watched over me, when his lamp shone upon my head, and when by his light I walked through darkness. Just as I was in the days of my prime, when the friendly counsel of God was over my tent, when the Almighty was yet with me, when my children were around me, when my steps were bathed with cream, and the rock poured out rivers of oil for me. When I went out to the gate by the city, when I took my seat in the open square, the young men saw me and hid, and the aged arose and stood. The princes refrained from talking and put their hand on their mouth. The voice of the nobles were hushed, and their tongues stuck to the roof of their mouth. When the ear heard, then it blessed me, and when the eye saw, then it approved me. Because I delivered the poor who cried out, the fatherless and the one who had no helper, the blessing of a perishing man came upon me, and I caused the widow's heart to sing for joy." What you can say about what we just read is that to Job, what he is describing here seems to be long in the past. Now, we don't know how long Satan had to afflict Job, but the only passage of time we get with certainty is the week between the arrival of Job's friends and their speaking to him. Nor do we know how long these speeches lasted. Were they back to back, or were they a day at a time, or what? However, we can safely assume that some time has passed, for even between Job 1 and 2, it is fairly clear that the events of Job 1 didn't happen one day and the events of Job 2 happened the next. Satan was given time to act in Job 1. He acted, and the results of his actions were allowed to manifest themselves. So a couple of months, maybe even up to a year between Job 1 and Job 29 is not necessarily out of the question. Regardless of how much or little time we're talking about, though, it seems like an eternity ago for Job. And oh, how Job longed for those days. The days that God watched over him and his lamp shined upon his head. The days when God's light, Job walked through darkness, and when the friendly counsel of God was over his tent. When the Almighty was with him and his children were around me. When Job went to the gate of the city, took his seat in the open square, and the young men withdrew to their corners, knowing that someone superior was present, and the aged men stood up to show him dignity. When the princes refrained from talking, and the voices of the nobles were hushed and approved of what Job said. And the reason for their approval? Because Job delivered the poor who cried out, he delivered the fatherless and the one who had no helper. The blessing of those close to death was upon Job, and he caused the widow's heart to sing. If we were speaking today, we might say, those were the days. And from Job's position, we can understand why he said those things. He was very wealthy. He was very well respected, but he used all of those things for the good and well-being of others, and yet now was suffering immensely, and his friends were calling him an unrepentant sinner. And it's very easy for us to understand Job's sentiment the reason he is suffering is because God is no longer with him. For man in general views blessings and sufferings as an absolute sign of God's being or not being with them. If a country lost a battle, the Lord must have been with the opposition and not with us. If I didn't get a job, then God must have been with the person who did and not with me. If I get some sort of disease, God must have abandoned me. Now, Job wasn't claiming God wasn't with him because of sin, but just because God is sovereign and can make any choice he wants. The problem with Job's thinking, and ours too, is that blessings do not necessarily denote God being with us. They can denote that, but they don't always denote that. God sends the rain on the just and on the unjust. God blesses physically those who are righteous and those who are wicked. God punishes the wicked, but he does so in his time, and at the same time allows the righteous to suffer too, even Well, not in the wrong, not only to test our faith, but simply as a result of living in a sinful world. God had not abandoned Job. He was still with Job, even though at the time it didn't feel like it. Remembering this can be of great comfort for the Christian, for it can strengthen our faith in God and even lift us out of the pits of despair by reminding us of who is in control and what the eternal rewards that will outweigh any current suffering are. That's what Job needed to remember, even in his difficult time. We'll continue on with Job's speech, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Job chapter 29, verses 14 to 25, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. We thank you for watching Walking Through the Bible today. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below. But if you like this video, we ask that you consider subscribing to our channel so you won't miss out on other videos in our series, as well as share this video among your friends so that the saving message of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.